Well, thanks, folks. It's great to see everyone here. Lots of familiar faces in the audience from various deals and negotiations we've done over recent years. And it's a good moment to be having this conversation today. And I think it was very prescient of Philip, characteristically prescient of him to organise this conference at this time so that we can take stock of the challenges but also the opportunities that I think face the North and indeed the country at this time. The re-empowerment of the North, I think, requires both thought and action, and Philip and Res Publica have made a major contribution to the thinking that has become the reality of policies around the North and the Northern Powerhouse over recent years, and I fully expect that to continue. But I think it is probably appropriate to start today's proceedings, as Philip did, to consider some of the responses that we need to make to the verdict that was given in the referendum. So let me start by saying two things. I think the first, that everyone in government, whether that's national government or local government, has a responsibility to lead. We're not there as commentators, we are there to act. And our joint responsibility must be to safeguard the jobs and investment that we have across the whole of the United Kingdom, but pertinently here today in the north of England. The decision that was made 2 weeks ago is clearly a momentous one. There's no mistaking the significance of it. But equally, I think there should be no doubt as to the resolve of us all united together to act in the national as well as the local interest to make the best of what we can. This is a time for cool heads, but also mutual respect, both at home and as we negotiate a new relationship with our European neighbours, who must continue to be our European friends. And I take heart from the way that we have advanced the devolution agenda in the North and right across the country in recent years. You'll hear from speakers later today, and we have among you in the audience today people with whom I and George Osborne and Jim O'Neill and James Wharton have negotiated over recent years from very often, different political parties. But I can say that in every single one of those negotiations, going back to the first city deal that I struck with Joe Anderson in Liverpool that inaugurated this devolution process, there was never any hint that party politics would stand in the way of acting in the interest of the people that we represent locally and nationally. And I think the spirit of that needs to pervade what we do now domestically, but also in terms of our relationships with our European friends and neighbours. The government has put in place and advanced arrangements for the EU negotiations that include every part of the United Kingdom. And you will recall on this day 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister, when he gave his statement in Downing Street, said quite rightly that the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland should be very much at the table and part of those negotiations. I thought immediately that it was necessary for English local government, cities, towns and counties, to also be part of that, and I argued strongly and successfully with my colleagues in government for English local government to be part of that team, and it needs to be a team that negotiates the best terms for our future relationship with the European Union. So the interests of every part of this nation will be represented, north, east, south and west, and that's exactly as it should be. There are clearly some decisions and some commitments that need to be taken in the short term as well as in the long term. One of the areas that I think is of particular importance to many people in this room and beyond around the country is that European structural fund allocations that support some very important projects that are either underway or very close to being put into practice. A program that started in 2014 goes to 2020. My view is very clear that those should be honoured in full, and it is necessary to give confidence to the to the investors and the investments that are going to be resulting from those programs. The second thing I wanted to say in response to the questions posed by the referendum is that this is a time when devolution is more important than ever. And I think it is absolutely essential that we redouble the commitment and indeed the pace and the extent of the devolution agenda. As Philip said, and Krishnan in his remarks, I think the referendum didn't so much create divisions in our country as expose ones that were already there. London voting to remain, the rest of England for out. Some metropolitan cities voting marginally to stay in, smaller industrial towns, especially here in the north, voting very heavily to leave. Now, there was a critique during the referendum campaign that I think everyone here is familiar with. It was a critique made of the European Union, whether we think it was accurate or not, which was that the EU was too remote, too unaccountable, too bureaucratic, had too much uniformity about it, was run by people that didn't know what it's like for me where I am. And traveling around during the campaign, but also before, and as someone that, as Philip says, sort of grew up in a small northern town, I sense that some of these charges applied to the way that our country has been run for many years, not just to the European Union. So amongst the answers to the challenge of the referendum result, I think has to be a much bigger role for local leadership in our national life. Local leadership that's rooted in communities, that's practical and pragmatic, not doctrinaire, that understands the neighborhoods that comprise an area and the differences from one place to another. And to be genuinely one nation, a term that was founded through a study and a reflection on this city of Manchester, here in Salford, in this area in particular, I think needs to inform the steps that we need to take during the days ahead. We need to empower all aspects, all areas of the country. And so devolution needs to go deeper and wider too, but especially deeper. Now, I think the good news is that that process doesn't need to be launched. It's not an idea that is being pressed on a government that hasn't showed some commitment to this. The process is well underway. Since the very first city deal that I negotiated with Liverpool, we've seen further waves of city deals, growth deals, and devolution deals. As little as 4 years ago, if we think back, when people referred to devolution, they invariably meant the transfer of power to Scotland or Wales. But now the policy includes very much the whole country, including the north of England, having an especially high profile over recent years. And that, of course, is quite right, because many of the most important and exciting developments in devolution are taking place here in the north of England. And no one should be surprised by this. The whole point, the whole conception of wanting to devolve power is something that I've always understood instinctively, that the best ideas, the best proposals, informed by the best knowledge, have to come from people who live, who work, who do business in an area, rather than from somewhere remote. And when it comes to the north of England, it is especially unsurprising that there should be a fount of challenging new ideas. Asa Briggs described Manchester as the shock city of the Industrial Revolution. It didn't wait for invitations and instructions from Parliament or from central government. It set the agenda, it got on with it. And I think these traditions run very deep in this area especially. This is where the modern world was brought into being, a wellspring of innovation that changed the course of history, not just in this country, but around the world. And even a century subsequently of centralization has not been enough to exhaust that spirit here. I think the geography of the north of England, I think, will also be relevant to our discussions during the day. Where once that very geography helped to create the conditions for the Industrial Revolution, it's today helping to drive progress on devolution. Now, every part of the country, I'm very clear, has the potential to benefit from the decentralization of power. But for cities, it's a no-brainer. A city and its surrounding communities constitute an organic whole, a natural focus from which to join up services and allocate investment. And although blessed with beautiful countryside on the doorstep, the North is the most urban part of the country outside London, home to 5 of England's 8 core cities and to many of its key cities. And whilst these great population centres are close to one another physically, there is more variety in 100 miles of the North than certain other places manage over the space of a continent. The city regions of the North, thus in my view, provide fertile ground for devolution, a series of connected but distinctive, large but local economies with both the ambition and the history and the opportunity to lead the way. Now, many of the important initiatives on devolution are coming from local communities themselves and from civic and business leaders themselves. The more that power is devolved to them, the more they can see what they can do with it, and the process of devolution is therefore acquiring its own momentum. And here in Greater Manchester, we see this every day. The first devolution deal, in fact, the first city deal was followed by the devolution deal, which was followed by subsequent waves of further devolution, all proposed and initiated locally. I think momentum needn't imply a single trajectory or speed of change. The diversity of the North is a strength, not a weakness, and that includes a variety of approaches to devolution itself. Because with different geographies and different priorities, each area has moved at its pace and in its own distinctive way. Now, to those of an excessively tidy frame of mind, and there are quite a lot of people in Whitehall that suffer from that affliction, then this is quite unbearable. This is a problem to be solved. And it's not that they oppose devolution, it's just that they want to implement it in a uniform, one-speed manner from the top down. To me, that is to miss the point completely. Clearly, there are common principles that must be respected, such as democratic accountability and cooperation across local boundaries. But beyond that, I believe that we should take a flexible approach to devolution, and that approach has been vindicated by what we've done. Certainly, cities like Greater Manchester and Liverpool wouldn't have been able to blaze their trails without it. In the past, when my predecessors and others have suggested devolution, suggested transferring powers from Westminster and Whitehall to cities, towns and counties, the objection has been that place X, Y or Z clearly either hasn't the appetite or hasn't the capability to make use of these powers, so we can't devolve them at all. The breakthrough that we made with the city deals was to allow places that did have the appetite, did demonstrate the capability, to proceed without waiting for everyone else to advance at the same time. And I think a uniform process of devolution would mean devolution at the pace of the slowest, most reluctant participant, and that would benefit no one. The most ambitious communities would be held back, and the more cautious communities would have no models then to follow and to adopt, and indeed to adapt. Now, a healthy sense of rivalry has always sharpened the will to succeed in these parts as much between cities as between areas of the country. But at the same time, as Philip has pointed out, there's no denying the common identity and common interests of the North. And as someone that grew up in the Northeast, I do recognise the connections that we have with the Northwest, and it's right to give expression to them too. So I'm very pleased to see the devolution agenda taking shape not just within each city region, but between them, exactly as Philip has advocated in his report. A prime example of this is the formation of Transport for the North, a major step forward towards the achievement of a pan-regional road and rail network fit for the 21st century. And this surely is the way forward. Communities choosing to join forces when and where the opportunity arises in place of the rigid top-down regionalism of the pre-devolution era that was imposed from Whitehall. I think it's great to see the cooperation between the north of England and its neighbouring communities. For example, with North Wales, not far from here, which has very close links with Greater Manchester, but also with Merseyside, with Cheshire and with Lancashire. They can be strengthened to mutual advantage. Also, looking further south to the North Midlands, where Cheshire, Warrington, Stoke and Staffordshire have been working collaboratively over the past year to maximise the growth benefits of HS2, including other advantages. So at a time when other cross-border institutions aren't faring so well, I think it's encouraging that everyone wants to join in the Northern Powerhouse. Now, to mention the Northern Powerhouse is to recall that it was only 2 years ago, almost to the day, it was June 2 years ago, that the words Northern Powerhouse first appeared in a ministerial speech here in the city, in Greater Manchester. But that's not where you've left them in a ministerial speech. It's no longer just a phrase to label a government proposal, a government thought. It's an identity that is increasingly being adopted and being taken forward by people here. In fact, it always was your own. Indeed, it's a rebuke, in my view, to those people who talk the North down, who emphasise the failures of the 20th century, most often, frankly, the failures of central government, rather than the potential of the 21st century, a potential that is beginning to be fulfilled. The figures that Philip referred to reflect very long-term trends that have characterized the North during this century of centralization, which I think has left the North and the towns and cities within it behind. But that is beginning to change, as you know. Take the last 2 years, foreign direct investment in the Northern Powerhouse is up 126%. Since 2010, the very long-standing north-south gap in private sector job creation has almost disappeared. Indeed, we see cities in the North and the Midlands as at the top of the job creation league. The entrepreneurial energies of the region have been released and deserve to be celebrated. Historically, there were fewer businesses in the 20th century, the late 20th century, being established in the North. But recent research by the London Stock Exchange has found that almost 80% of the fastest growing listed companies in the UK were headquartered outside London, with Manchester and Leeds being the most prominent locations. So now more than ever, it's essential that this progress continues. For local government leaders, local enterprise partnerships, many of whom are represented here today, and other investors in the future success of the North, it means maintaining the momentum of devolution and the local growth agenda, to support and incentivize locally led investment in transport, in housing, in skills, and other priorities. We have, right at the moment, the next wave of the successful growth deals that were a product of Michael Heseltine's report, No Stone Unturned. The first wave of growth deals are now resulting in investments right across the north of England. In a couple of weeks' time, we will close the applications for the next £4.3 billion worth of funding available from the Local Growth Fund. Funds that were previously tied up in central government, now available to places right across the country. The money will go to the most ambitious areas that have the best devolution proposals. Now, I've always been clear that each deal and each piece of decentralizing legislation represents a fresh point of departure, not a final destination. So to change metaphors, the tide of decentralization has advanced by waves, each building on its predecessor, from city deals to growth deals to devolution deals. This model of reform, as I said a few moments ago, has been vital to getting where we are now. But I believe we're now moving to a new phase, to one of continuous devolution, in which the transfer of power isn't negotiated on a central government timetable, or still less according to a set menu of options, but as and when communities and local leaders identify new opportunities. And if you lift the lid on Whitehall, what you see is an ongoing now negotiation between different departments and ministers, an open process of give and take, proposal and counter-proposal. Actually, this is how things have always been in central government. This is how things work ministers and ministries negotiate with each other for funding, for the authority to advance legislation. There is a process within Whitehall where this happens as is normal. But I see no reason why this shouldn't be the same between central government and local government, a continued conversation about what powers, what resources should be where, each with its own role and mandate, but equal partners in the governance of the nation. Now, we're not quite there yet, but underpinned by the Cities and Devolution Act that we passed in the last year, the enabling mechanisms are coming together. Firstly, combined authorities to provide the heft and coordination that communities need to deal directly with Whitehall and to take control of major investment decisions. Secondly, elected mayors to provide combined authorities with democratic accountability and high-profile leadership. In May next year, there will be mayors elected in metro areas in at least 9 parts of the country. The third enabling mechanism is fiscal devolution, the financial independence, stability, and incentives that communities need to push for local economic growth. The shift to 100% retention of business rates locally will be a massive step forward in this direction, and I'm delighted that Greater Manchester and the Liverpool City region will be the first places in the country to implement full business rate retention. So whether on fiscal devolution, whether on mayors, or whether on combined authorities, Devo North is leading the way. Before concluding, I'd just like to throw in a fourth area, which in my view has been underplayed when it comes to the potential for successful devolution, and that is data devolution. To make the best investments for local growth, to fully understand the skills and infrastructure requirements of local businesses, to provide the public services that respond to local needs, local decision makers need up-to-date, accurate, and meaningful information. And too much of that is locked away in Whitehall. Because in an over-centralized country, information has been sucked upwards, away from the front line, and into these separate top-down bureaucracies of Whitehall. The only place where data can join up again is in these distant centres of control, and it needs to be joined up much more locally. And furthermore, whenever you have data held in a bureaucracy, information is made homogeneous and aggregated, erasing the fine detail on which the local picture depends. But when communities take control of service delivery and investment for growth, then data can be joined up locally, providing the intelligence that enables effective local decision-making. At the leading edge, data devolution is about smart communities, the use of advanced technology to gather and process information in real time. It's exciting stuff, but perhaps more important is something that relies more on people than machines, and that's the willingness to learn from experience. Devolution means different things being tried in different places. And so a concerted effort to share the lessons is immensely worthwhile. These should be communicated between communities, not have everything filtered through central government. There's an obvious role here for the combined authorities and for local enterprise partnerships, but also for independent institutions. And the flourishing of so many think tanks and research institutions in this area of policy is a real encouragement. And no doubt the very welcome debut of Res Publica North will add to this momentum. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, I want to boost the prospects for every part of the country. And indeed, I can point to exciting developments in devolution from one end of England to the other, and elsewhere in Britain too. But nevertheless, there can be no denying the particular achievements of this part of the world. The Northern Powerhouse is setting the pace, and Devo North is breaking new ground every day. Speaking personally, it's a great honor to be working with so many formidable, impressive leaders from different communities, different sectors, and different political parties. At a time when the country must overcome our divisions, the willingness of so many people to work together towards the common good is an inspiration, I think, to the rest of the country. It's a time of great change for our country, not least changes of leadership. And I would just end by urging you all. You wouldn't be here if you didn't share my passion for the progress that we've made and the appetite to do more. But as was said by Krishnan and Philip right at the beginning, Almost all of the political parties are having a conversation, at least about leadership, during the days and weeks ahead. And I would urge all of you to make your voices heard, not only to ask, but to insist that those chosen to lead work for and not against your empowerment. You've already demonstrated your ability to take responsibility, to show leadership, and to take control. There's no doubt about the capacity of you to make your own decisions, so don't settle for anything less. In the end, finding true north, the subject that we are debating all day, means setting your direction, and now is the time for you to make that unarguable. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me today.